This audiobook not only promises a narrated exploration of a celestial realm, but also an immersive experience that transcends the limits of our earthly existence. Nosso Lar by Chico Xavier is more than a literary masterpiece. It is a beacon of wisdom with the power to transform our perspectives on life, death, and the realms that extend beyond. The author's words have the unique ability to touch the deepest recesses of our hearts, offering solace, understanding, and a glimpse into the mysteries of the universe. Welcome to the transformative world of Nosso Lar. Preface. This is more than just a book. It's an invitation to transcend the ordinary and embark on a journey of spiritual discovery. May the pages of Nosso Lar be your compass as you navigate the realms of the unknown, and may the wisdom within them leave an eternal imprint on the canvas of your soul. As you step into the celestial city of Nosso Lar, be prepared to be captivated by its luminous schools, healing hospitals, and collaborative endeavors. André Luiz, a guide through the unseen realms, unveils the profound interplay between the living and those who have transcended. Every word inscribed in this literary masterpiece serves as a portal, inviting you to explore the limitless landscapes of existence. It's a journey that traverses the veil between worlds, where the whispers of the departed echo, and the lessons of the afterlife beckon us to the truth of life beyond death. So, take a deep breath, open your mind to the unexplored, for from this moment on, you're about to encounter a world where the magic of language intertwines with the wonder of imagination. The journey begins now, and the destination is a blank page, waiting to be filled with the vibrant colors of a unique and captivating story. Chapter 1. In the Lower Zones. The narrator describes his experience in the lower zones after death, where he loses the sense of time and space. Convinced he no longer belongs to the living, he still breathes in long breaths. Tormented by unknown forces, he feels like a bitter elf in dark bars of horror, often screaming and pleading for mercy. Sinister laughter and demonic forms add to his bewilderment. The landscape, mostly dark, is occasionally bathed in a whitish light. The strange journey continues, driven by fear, with the narrator losing all sense of direction and family. He grapples with the religious and philosophical significance of his existence, realizing the importance of faith. The narrator acknowledges his earthly shortcomings, having neglected spiritual values for material comfort. In the end, he regrets not developing the divine potential within him and urges people on Earth to prepare their inner selves to avoid a path of bitterness. Chapter 2. Clorencio. In the desolate afterlife, the narrator confronts accusatory voices branding him as suicide. Hunger, thirst, and the relentless assault of dark forces plague him. Memories of his earthly struggles and the pain of separation intensify his torment. Despite resisting the label of suicide, he seeks solace in prayer, realizing the need for spiritual comfort. Unexpectedly, an emissary named Clorencio appears, offering support and guidance. Overwhelmed, the narrator pleads for divine help, experiencing a transformative moment as the emissary, Clorencio, assures him of divine support. The narrative hints at a journey towards a place called Nosso Lar, signifying a pivotal shift in the narrator's spiritual exploration. Chapter 3. Collective Prayer. In the ethereal realm, the narrator, resembling a wounded soldier, encounters a comforting scene. Guided by Clorencio, they enter through a wall opening into a place of gentle radiance and beautiful surroundings. Clorencio instructs attendants to place the narrator in a well-appointed room, promising to return the next morning. Grateful, the narrator is served a revitalizing broth and learns about the proximity of spiritual spheres to Earth. As he listens to divine melodies, he yearns to join the evening prayer assembly, witnessing a grand spectacle. The elders, led by a luminous figure, engage in collective prayer and Clorencio participates. Overwhelmed by the celestial experience, the narrator undergoes a profound transformation, feeling a sudden influx of comfort and hope after years of suffering. Chapter 4. The Spiritual Physician. The next day, after a rejuvenating sleep, I basked in the warm embrace of the friendly sun. Despite feeling transformed, a lingering longing for home and family stayed with me. Eager to explore, my attempts were hindered without the assistance of the nurse. Clarencio and a friendly stranger, identified as Brother Enrique de Luna from the Medical Assistance Service, visited me. Enrique, clad in white and exuding sympathy, examined me and expressed regret over my arrival due to suicide. I contested, recounting my intense struggle against death in a physical hospital. Enrique calmly unveiled the spiritual and mental roots of my ailments, attributing them to a life lacking in fraternity and temperance. Facing revelations about the spiritual origins of my physical maladies, I acknowledged the undeniable reality of my spiritual condition. The benevolent presence of Clarencio, Enrique's compassionate explanation, and the nurse's fraternal calm prompted deep self-reflection. Overwhelmed by shame, I wept, finding solace in the path to repentance. Chapter 5. Receiving Assistance. Receiving assistance, André Luiz encounters Ligias, a compassionate young spirit assigned to assist him in the spiritual colony of Nosso Lar. Ligias, identified as André Luiz's spiritual brother and a health services visitor, carries a bag of medical supplies and wears a warm smile. He informs André Luiz about the extensive work in the colony, emphasizing that there are over 1,000 spiritual patients in their section alone. As Ligias examines André Luiz, he reveals severe health issues in the intestinal, liver, and kidney regions, attributing these problems to André Luiz's own actions. Ligias consoles him, explaining that many others in the colony face similar conditions, including those who suffered mutilations or mental distress due to past actions on Earth. Ligias dismisses the notion that Nosso Lar is exclusively for victorious spirits, stating that they find happiness in their work and service. He elaborates on the concept of many being called but few answering, highlighting the challenges spirits face in overcoming their earthly mistakes. The chapter underscores the necessity of hard work and service for spiritual progression. Ligias provides insights into the healing process, explaining that while André Luiz will receive affectionate care and may become a valuable collaborator, the root cause of his ailments lies within himself and requires addressing the spiritual distortions he accumulated on Earth. The passage concludes with Ligias encouraging André Luiz to express genuine repentance, acknowledging the therapeutic value of tears. Ligias praises the microscopic organizations of earthly cells, symbolizing the humble yet essential role they play in facilitating spiritual rectification. The chapter ends with a tender farewell from Ligias, who offers André Luiz a loving kiss. Chapter 6. Precious Warning. André Luiz is visited by Clarencio and the attentive visitor immediately after the twilight prayer. Clarencio, exuding generosity, inquires about André Luiz's well-being, embracing him. André Luiz, portraying the typical response of an earthly patient being comforted, begins to explain his condition while the two benefactors comfortably sit beside him. André Luiz describes his physical and emotional sufferings, emphasizing the weight of his cross and the intensity of his pain. He expresses concern about his family, wondering about the fate of his wife and children, reflecting on the challenges and sorrows he faced on Earth and in the afterlife. He questions the nature of life, depicting it as a succession of miseries and tears, and contemplates whether there is any relief from the cycle of suffering. Clarencio, maintaining a composed demeanor, rises and addresses André Luiz with a straightforward inquiry about his genuine desire for spiritual healing. Upon André Luiz's affirmative response, Clarencio advises him to refrain from excessive self-discussion and lamentation, stating that such behavior indicates mental illness and is counterproductive to the laborious process of treatment. Clarencio urges André Luiz to cultivate new thoughts, discipline his speech, and open his heart to the divine Son for spiritual balance. Clarencio emphasizes the importance of family as a sacred construct, but reminds André Luiz that earthly families are sections of the universal family under divine guidance. He urges André Luiz to focus on constructive thoughts, as lamentation only strengthens the ties to petty memories. Clarencio draws parallels between André Luiz's earthly pursuits and the spiritual work required in the colony, emphasizing that pain is an opportunity for soul enrichment and that struggle is the path to divine fulfillment. As André Luiz absorbs Clarencio's guidance, his tears dry, and he is called to a more dignified posture. Clarencio encourages André Luiz to embrace the laborious service as a sacred heritage, emphasizing that the providence overflows with love despite the burden of individual debts. André Luiz is reminded of his past pursuit of material advantages on Earth and is now presented with the opportunity to acquire spiritual acquisitions in the colony. The chapter concludes with André Luiz feeling uplifted, grateful for the valuable lesson, and determined to better understand the divine will. Chapter 7. Ligia's Explanations. André Luiz experiences regular visits from Clarencio and daily attention from Ligia's. As he adjusts to his new responsibilities, a sense of relief gradually replaces the intense physical and mobility limitations. Despite improvements, memories of earthly phenomena bring back feelings of anguish, fear of the unknown, and the sorrow of adaptation struggles. However, André Luiz finds a growing sense of security within himself and delights in contemplating the vast horizons through spacious windows, marveling at the enhanced beauty of nature in the spiritual realm. Ligia's, the compassionate companion, provides explanations to André Luiz's questions. Ligia's emphasizes that the death of the physical body does not lead to miraculous situations. Rather, the evolutionary process involves various regions for disembodied spirits, just as there are countless and surprising planes for those in terrestrial bodies. André Luiz is intrigued by the similarities to Earth's forms and creatures, considering he is in a spiritual sphere. As André Luiz indulges in introspective thoughts, he wonders about the absence of familiar faces from his earthly life. Ligia's assures him that his mother has been assisting him tirelessly since his crisis, even though he remained in lower spheres for over 8 consecutive years. Ligia's explains the subtle protective processes initiated by André Luiz's mother and Clarencio, shedding light on the role of prayer in raising his vibrational frequency to attract divine assistance. Yearning to see his mother, André Luiz expresses his desire, and Ligia's reassures him that she will likely visit soon. Ligia's imparts a valuable lesson on the 3 fundamental requirements for noble achievements: active will, persistent work, and just merit. As Ligia's departs, André Luiz reflects on the profound wisdom encapsulated in those few words, contemplating the extensive program laid out before him. Chapter 8. Organization of Services. After several weeks of active treatment, I ventured out with Ligia's for the first time, marveling at the streets of Nosso Lar. The vast avenues adorned with lush trees and the pure air created an atmosphere of profound spiritual tranquility. Despite the apparent calm, the streets were bustling with numerous entities, some lost in thought and others offering welcoming glances. Ligia's guided me through the Ministry of Aid's area, explaining that all the buildings and residential houses served the tasks within their jurisdiction. This region catered to the sick, heard prayers, selected petitions, prepared earthly reincarnations, organized relief teams for the umbral inhabitants, and studied solutions for all suffering-related processes. I inquired about the existence of a Ministry of Aid in Nosso Lar, and Ligia's affirmed it, describing the colony's organizational structure. He explained that Nosso Lar had 6 ministries: regeneration, aid, communication, enlightenment, elevation, and divine union, each guided by 12 ministers. The ministries connected the spiritual city to both earthly and higher planes. Ligia's revealed that Nosso Lar had a history originating from Portuguese founders who had passed away in Brazil in the 16th century. He recounted the challenges faced during the colony's early days, emphasizing the transformation of rough areas into refined landscapes through persistent effort and spiritual solidarity. As we reached a magnificent square with extensive gardens and a palace at its center, Ligia's pointed out that this square served as the convergence point for all 6 ministries, extending in a triangular pattern. The palace housed the governor, who was the tirelessly dedicated leader overseeing administrative tasks with the assistance of 3,000 employees. In respectful admiration, Ligia spoke of the governor's unyielding commitment to service, noting that while others took breaks and enjoyed leisure, the governor rarely rested. Despite 40 years in Nosso Lar, Ligia's had rarely seen the governor participate in public festivities, emphasizing the leader's focus on perpetual service. The visit ended with Lygia's sharing that they recently celebrated the 114th anniversary of the governor's magnificent leadership, leaving us both in silent reverence as we gazed at the majestic towers piercing the sky. Chapter 9: Food Dilemma. Enchanted by the view of the prodigious gardens, I asked the dedicated nurse, Lygia's, if we could rest for a few minutes on a nearby bench. Lygia's gladly agreed, and a pleasant feeling of peace enveloped my spirit. Colorful water fountains danced in the air, creating enchanting figures. Reflecting on the vast hive of service around us, I expressed curiosity about the supply aspect, noting the absence of a Ministry of Economy. Lygia's explained that the current governor had downplayed material concerns, reducing supply activities to a distribution service under the direct control of the governorate. He elaborated on the historical struggle to adapt inhabitants to a simpler lifestyle. Initially, many newcomers to Nosso Lar demanded lavish meals and stimulating drinks, clinging to old earthly habits. The governor, however, took decisive measures to promote simplicity. In response to opposition, 200 instructors from a higher sphere arrived to disseminate knowledge on the science of breathing and absorbing vital elements from the atmosphere. Lygia's recounted the 21-year struggle where the Ministry of Elevation was the first to adopt a more restrained diet. The Ministry of Enlightenment, influenced by scientists dedicated to mathematical sciences, was initially resistant. Tensions led to disturbances in the former Department of Regeneration, prompting the governor to take unprecedented defensive measures, including closing the Ministry of Communication temporarily. Facing threats and potential invasion from the umbral, the governor, after consulting the Ministry of Divine Union, implemented stringent measures. For over 6 months, food services in Nosso Lar were reduced to inhaling vital elements through breath and consuming water mixed with solar, electric, and magnetic elements. Ultimately, the governorate triumphed, and the Ministry of Enlightenment acknowledged its mistake, contributing to the readjustment efforts. The city returned to normalcy with a profound lesson learned about the significance of spiritual understanding. The governor's perceived audacity became a pivotal measure for spiritual liberation, reducing the physical aspect and enhancing spiritual depth. Lygia's fell silent, and I pondered deeply on the profound lesson unveiled. Chapter 10: In the Water Grove. Intrigued by the colony's water system, the protagonist, André Luiz, explores the water reservoir. The aerial transport, or aerobus, takes him to the vast and beautiful water grove. The river, named Rio Azul, is the primary water source for the colony. The water, almost fluid-like, is used for nourishment and healing. The Ministry of the Divine Union oversees water distribution, emphasizing its spiritual significance. André learns that water, a gift from the divine, plays a crucial role in spiritual and physical well-being. The chapter highlights the importance of water in spiritual practices and daily life in the spirit realm. Chapter 11: News from the Plan. André Luiz expresses a desire for his generous companion, Lygia's, to provide different observations in various neighborhoods of the colony. However, pressing duties call Lygia's away, and he explains the vast and active nature of the ministries in Nosso Lar. Despite the enormity of these ministries, Lygia's assures André Luiz that, even if he can't accompany him, Clarencio has the authority to grant him easy access to any department. Returning to the aerobus station, the vehicle promptly arrives. Feeling more at ease, André Luiz is no longer uncomfortable in the presence of fellow passengers. The prior experience has been beneficial, and his mind is now buzzing with useful inquiries. Taking advantage of the opportunity, André Luiz questions Lygia's about the similarities between all spiritual colonies and their processes. Lygia's clarifies that spiritual colonies vary greatly, just like regions and establishments on Earth. Each colony has its own unique characteristics, shaped by common origins and the grandeur of their purposes. The organization into ministries, a system borrowed from Alvorada Nova, a significant spiritual colony nearby, is a reflection of their spiritual aspirations. Lygia's further explains the strict hierarchy and order within these ministries, emphasizing that positions are earned through extended periods of service and learning. Only a few entities, over the course of 10 years, gain specific responsibilities in the Ministry of Divine Union. Lysias elaborates on the different ministries, detailing the arduous tasks involved in aid, the weighty testimonials in regeneration, the responsibilities in communication, the intellectual depth required in enlightenment, the sacrifice and illumination in elevation, and the knowledge and sincere application of universal love in the Ministry of Divine Union. The governorship, the administrative hub overseeing various services, adheres strictly to the laws of rest and work. Questioning further, André Luiz learns about the selection process for newly arrived spirits from lower zones, which involves placements in ministries based on their receptivity and progress. The governor, despite occasional absences, actively participates in regeneration, addressing the challenges faced by troubled spirits from Umbral. Lysias concludes the conversation by explaining the significance of music in enhancing productivity across all sectors of constructive effort in Nosso Lar. As Lysias is urgently called to another pavilion, André Luiz retreats to his comfortable room, pondering the information he has received. Chapter 12, The Threshold. The Umbral, André Luiz, intrigued by the valuable information he has received, expresses a keen desire to deepen his understanding of various issues suggested by Lysias's teachings. His curiosity is particularly piqued by references to spirits in the Umbral, a region unfamiliar to him due to the lack of religious preparation in the earthly realm. Prompted by André Luiz's questions, Lysias explains that the Umbral begins at the Earth's crust and serves as a dark zone for those who fail to embrace sacred duties, lingering in indecision or the swamp of numerous mistakes. He describes it as a purgatorial region where mental residues are gradually burned away, representing a purification process for souls unable to proceed to higher spiritual planes due to unresolved issues from their earthly lives. Lysias uses the metaphor of dirty laundry to illustrate how individuals, upon reincarnation, carry the impurity of unresolved issues that should be cleansed through the challenges of earthly life. However, many fail to fulfill this purification process and, instead, accumulate more impurities, creating a self-imposed imprisonment. The Umbral acts as a purgatorial region where these mental impurities are gradually burned away. He emphasizes that the Umbral is of profound interest to those on Earth, as it accumulates everything that lacks purpose for higher spiritual life. Lysias highlights the wisdom of creating such a department around the planet, where legions of indecisive and ignorant souls reside. The Umbral is populated by individuals not wicked enough for harsher colonies of repair or noble enough for elevated planes. It becomes a region of profound disturbances, housing various categories of individuals, including the unfortunate, wrongdoers, and vagabonds. Addressing André Luiz's concerns about the lack of defense and organization in the Umbral, Lysias explains that organization is an attribute of organized spirits. Despite the shadows and anguish in the Umbral, divine protection is ever present, and spirits stay there for as long as necessary. Lysias concludes by emphasizing the crucial role of colonies like Nosso Lar, dedicated to spiritual work and assistance, in providing aid to the troubled spirits of the Umbral. Impressed by this revelation, André Luiz expresses his desire to work with these legions of suffering souls, bringing them the spiritual nourishment of enlightenment. Lysias, in response, questions André Luiz about his preparedness for such a service, leaving him with a significant consideration. Chapter 11. News from the Plan. André Luiz expresses a desire for his generous companion, Lysias, to provide different observations in various neighborhoods of the colony. However, pressing duties call Lysias away, and he explains the vast and active nature of the ministries in Nosso Lar. Despite the enormity of these ministries, Lysias assures André Luiz that, even if he can't accompany him, Clarencio has the authority to grant him easy access to any department. Returning to the aerobus station, the vehicle promptly arrives. Feeling more at ease, André Luiz is no longer uncomfortable in the presence of fellow passengers. The prior experience has been beneficial, and his mind is now buzzing with useful inquiries. Taking advantage of the opportunity, André Luiz questions Lysias about the similarities between all spiritual colonies and their processes. Lysias clarifies that spiritual colonies vary greatly, just like regions and establishments on Earth. Each colony has its own unique characteristics, shaped by common origins and the grandeur of their purposes. The organization into ministries, a system borrowed from Alvarado Nova, a significant spiritual colony nearby, is a reflection of their spiritual aspirations. Lysias further explains the strict hierarchy and order within these ministries, emphasizing that positions are earned through extended periods of service and learning. Only a few entities, over the course of 10 years, gain specific responsibilities in the Ministry of Divine Union. Lysias elaborates on the different ministries, detailing the arduous tasks involved in aid, the weighty testimonials in regeneration, the responsibilities in communication, the intellectual depth required in enlightenment, the sacrifice and illumination in elevation, and the knowledge and sincere application of universal love in the Ministry of Divine Union. The governorship, the administrative hub overseeing various services, adheres strictly to the laws of rest and work. Questioning further, André Luiz learns about the selection process for newly arrived spirits from lower zones, which involves placements in ministries based on their receptivity and progress. The governor, despite occasional absences, actively participates in regeneration, addressing the challenges faced by troubled spirits from Umbral. Lysias concludes the conversation by explaining the significance of music in enhancing productivity across all sectors of constructive effort in Nosso Lar. As Lysias is urgently called to another pavilion, André Luiz retreats to his comfortable room, pondering the information he has received. Chapter 12, The Threshold. The Umbral, André Luiz, intrigued by the valuable information he has received, expresses a keen desire to deepen his understanding of various issues suggested by Lysias's teachings. His curiosity is particularly piqued by references to spirits in the Umbral, a region unfamiliar to him due to the lack of religious preparation in the earthly realm. Prompted by André Luiz's questions, Lysias explains that the Umbral begins at the Earth's crust and serves as a dark zone for those who fail to embrace sacred duties, lingering in indecision or the swamp of numerous mistakes. He describes it as a purgatorial region where mental residues are gradually burned away, representing a purification process for souls unable to proceed to higher spiritual planes due to unresolved issues from their earthly lives. Lysias uses the metaphor of dirty laundry to illustrate how individuals, upon reincarnation, carry the impurity of unresolved issues that should be cleansed through the challenges of earthly life. However, many fail to fulfill this purification process and, instead, accumulate more impurities, creating a self-imposed imprisonment. The Umbral acts as a purgatorial region where these mental impurities are gradually burned away. He emphasizes that the Umbral is of profound interest to those on Earth, as it accumulates everything that lacks purpose for higher spiritual life. Lysias highlights the wisdom of creating such a department around the planet, where legions of indecisive and ignorant souls reside. The Umbral is populated by individuals not wicked enough for harsher colonies of repair or noble enough for elevated planes. It becomes a region of profound disturbances, housing various categories of individuals, including the unfortunate, wrongdoers, and vagabonds. Addressing André Luiz's concerns about the lack of defense and organization in the Umbral, Lysias explains that organization is an attribute of organized spirits. Despite the shadows and anguish in the Umbral, divine protection is ever present, and spirits stay there for as long as necessary. Lysias concludes by emphasizing the crucial role of colonies like Nosso Lar, dedicated to spiritual work and assistance, in providing aid to the troubled spirits of the Umbral. Impressed by this revelation, André Luiz expresses his desire to work with these legions of suffering souls, bringing them the spiritual nourishment of enlightenment. Lysias, in response, questions André Luiz about his preparedness for such a service, leaving him with a significant consideration. Chapter 13, In the Minister's Office. André Luiz, experiencing improvement in his condition, feels a growing need for activity and work. After spending a considerable time in challenging struggles, he regains interest in the daily affairs that occupy the lives of ordinary people on Earth. Despite recognizing missed opportunities and past mistakes, he now longs to engage in meaningful work. Reflecting on his past as a physician, André Luiz feels a certain emptiness in his heart, unable to contribute actively to the well-being of others in his current spiritual state. He acknowledges the superior knowledge and abilities of spiritual physicians in Nosso Lar compared to his earthly medical expertise. In the midst of these difficulties, André Luiz confides in Ligias, seeking guidance. Ligias suggests seeking help from Clarencio, the Minister of Assistance, who is known for his generosity. André Luiz eagerly takes this advice and makes arrangements to meet Clarencio in his private office the next morning. When André Luiz arrives at Clarencio's office, he finds 3 other individuals waiting for their turn. Clarencio, attending to urgent matters, employs a method of group reception to efficiently address common concerns and save time. After a considerable wait, André Luiz is finally called into Clarencio's office, accompanied by an elderly lady who is heard first due to the order of precedence. The woman tearfully requests assistance for her 2 sons, who are facing hardships on Earth. Clarencio compassionately listens, but emphasizes the importance of spiritual humility, work, and cooperation in providing aid. Clarencio questions the woman about her contribution to spiritual work, measured in bonusura, points earned per hour of service. Despite her plea for resources to protect her sons, Clarencio points out her lack of accumulated hours and her inconsistency in various assigned tasks. The woman justifies her challenges in different areas of service, expressing difficulty in adapting to specific tasks. Clarencio, undeterred, explains the importance of humility, work, and cooperation in the spiritual realm. He highlights that those who don't contribute won't receive assistance and encourages her to reflect on her approach before addressing her request. As the woman leaves, emotionally moved, Clarencio turns his attention to André Luiz, inviting him to share his concerns and questions in the minister's office. Chapter 14. Clarencio's explanations. André Luiz, feeling nervous like an inexperienced apprentice before strict examiners, witnesses a woman in tears seeking Clarencio's assistance. Despite his initial hesitation and regret for provoking the audience, André Luiz is encouraged by Clarencio to express his concerns. André Luiz contemplates asking for a specific medical assignment in Nosso Lar, but his conscience prompts him to reconsider. He questions whether it is presumptuous to request medical responsibilities in a place where he is still considered a patient. However, Clarencio, seemingly aware of André Luiz's inner thoughts, firmly invites him to speak. André Luiz, torn between his desire to contribute and his uncertainties, expresses his longing to engage in meaningful work that keeps him active. Clarencio, after observing André Luiz, acknowledges his request verbally but delves into the deeper intentions behind it. Clarencio reflects on André Luiz's past as a physician on Earth, pointing out his privileged circumstances and rapid success. He emphasizes André Luiz's deviation from the true purpose of service and warns against the pitfalls of professional titles, stating that titles are merely invitations for individuals to enter divine temples of work. Acknowledging André Luiz's desire to serve as a physician in the spiritual realm, Clarencio challenges him to go beyond the physical aspect and delve into the spiritual aspects of life. He criticizes the narrow focus of some earthly doctors who limit themselves to anatomical studies without understanding the broader aspects of life. André Luiz, astonished by these new perspectives on professional responsibility, is unable to intervene and awaits Clarencio's further explanations. Clarencio continues, stating that André Luiz needs to prepare adequately for spiritual services in Nosso Lar and reassures him that, despite his current limitations, intercessions have been made on his behalf. Clarencio reveals that André Luiz's mother and other friends have interceded on his behalf, and despite past shortcomings, the good deeds André Luiz performed on Earth have garnered support from grateful recipients. Clarencio concludes with encouragement, stating that André Luiz will learn new lessons in Nosso Lar and, after gaining experience, will efficiently collaborate in their collective spiritual work. Overwhelmed with joy, André Luiz sheds tears of happiness in the colony, experiencing a jubilation that may be difficult for those on Earth to comprehend. Chapter 15. Maternal Visit. André Luiz, heeding Clarentia's advice, seeks to regain his strength for further learning. Despite the seemingly harsh observations, he reflects on his past mistakes and acknowledges the significance of the human experience. André Luiz spends days in deep contemplation on life, feeling a strong desire to revisit his earthly home. However, he refrains from making new requests, recognizing the generosity of the Ministry of Assistance towards him. Lygius tries to uplift André Luiz with comforting words, but he remains in a phase of introspection called by his deep conscience. One day, Lygius excitedly announces the arrival of a visitor who is searching for André Luiz. André Luiz correctly guesses that it is his mother and joyfully embraces her upon her arrival. Overwhelmed with emotion, André Luiz experiences a profound spiritual joy, reminiscent of his childhood. The reunion is filled with tears of happiness and sacred moments of bliss. In the presence of his mother, André Luiz feels like a child again, playing in the rain in the garden. He cherishes every detail of her appearance, observing her familiar attire. His mother, noticing his emotional state, advises him not to be excessively moved, as excessive joy can also burden the heart. As André Luiz shares his feelings with his mother, he is reminded of earthly wounds and struggles to release the residues brought from Earth. His mother listens silently, expressing a deep melancholy. She gently consoles him and encourages him to focus on the divine teachings rather than dwelling on past grievances. His mother acknowledges the separation imposed by Providence as a means to learn divine love. Despite André Luiz's confessions, she emphasizes the importance of embracing the spiritual lessons offered in their new environment. She explains that tears and wounds are part of the blessed process of extending their purest feelings. Her words awaken André Luiz, and he realizes the need to change his mental attitude. Grateful for his mother's love, he rises, kisses her forehead, and sees her as more loving and beautiful than ever before. Chapter 16. Confidences. André Luiz finds solace in his mother's comforting words, which rejuvenate his inner energies. His mother discusses her spiritual service as a blessing, turning pains and difficulties into opportunities for joy and sublime lessons. André Luiz is filled with unexpected and indescribable contentment, feeling transformed into a happier and more optimistic being. Expressing admiration for his mother's spiritual sphere, André Luiz envisions it as a realm of marvelous spiritual contemplations and happiness. His mother, however, emphasizes that higher spheres demand more work and greater selflessness. She dispels the notion of a serene existence, clarifying that she actively engages in spiritual work for their collective spiritual renewal. André Luiz inquires about his father's whereabouts, and his mother reveals that his father has been in a dark region called the Umbral for 12 years. She unveils his father's hidden weaknesses and clandestine connections, leading to his difficult passage into the Umbral. Despite her efforts to guide him, his father struggles due to low vibrational energy, and André Luiz learns about his sisters, Clara and Priscilla, also residing in the Umbral. His mother shares the challenges she faces, attempting to help his father and sisters. She explains the complexities of influencing his father's spiritual perception and mentions the sacrifice of his sister Luisa, who recently reincarnated on Earth to assist the family. André Luiz is astonished by the revelations about his family's spiritual conditions, particularly his father's struggles and his sister's predicaments. Intrigued, André Luiz expresses concern about his family's well-being and offers his assistance upon returning. However, his mother advises him to focus on his own recovery before delving into their earthly problems. The chapter ends with André Luiz feeling both astonished and grateful for his mother's guidance and the profound impact of her visit. Chapter 17. In Lygia's home. André Luiz experiences a new phase in his spiritual journey after his mother's visit. Lygia's invites him to observe various sectors of spiritual services, excluding higher ministries. André Luiz is filled with joy, and Clarencio grants him permission to explore and learn. Clarencio presents André Luiz with a document allowing him access to several ministries for a year. Lygius suggests André Luiz stay in his home during this observation period, promising motherly care. Overwhelmed with gratitude, André Luiz is delighted at the prospect of a new life and expresses his appreciation. Lygius accompanies André Luiz to his home, a charming building surrounded by a colorful garden. The welcoming matron, Lygia's mother, greets André Luiz warmly, offering him sisterly and motherly care. André Luiz is deeply moved by the generous hospitality. The house is described as simple yet cozy, with familiar furniture and small variations. The chapter reveals glimpses of spiritual life, such as sublime paintings and musical instruments. Lygius humorously mentions the absence of malicious writers in their literature. As André Luiz explores the house, he is introduced to Lygia's family, including his mother Laura and sisters Iolanda and Judite. The atmosphere is filled with warmth and familiarity, making André Luiz feel at home. The chapter concludes with the family gathering for prayer. As they listen to gentle music, André Luiz experiences a profound and mysterious joy, feeling a deep connection to the spiritual realm. Chapter 18. Love, Nourishment of Souls. After a prayer, the hostess, Mrs. Laura, invites everyone to the table, serving a comforting broth and fragrant fruits. The conversation turns to the unique nature of spiritual nourishment in Nosso Lar. Mrs. Laura humorously remarks that meals in Nosso Lar are more pleasant than on Earth, and various ministries, including those of aid and regeneration, rely on fluidic concentrates due to the intense energy expended in their work. The concept of spiritual nourishment is explained, highlighting that love is the fundamental sustenance of beings. The discussion emphasizes that the physical food is a transient material aspect, while the soul thrives on love. The more evolved the being, the more refined the process of spiritual nourishment. The family members share insights into the different aspects of spiritual nourishment in various realms. They discuss the importance of love as the foundation of existence, and Mrs. Laura mentions that even the phenomenon of sex is a sacred expression of universal and divine love. The chapter concludes with the family preparing to go to the music field for an excursion. Mrs. Laura explains that love is the divine bread of souls and the sublime nourishment of hearts, emphasizing the beauty and strength of affectionate bonds in the spiritual realm. Chapter 19. The Young Disembodied. The narrative explores the situation of Eloisa, a recent arrival from Earth who is recovering from tuberculosis. The protagonist, André Luiz, engages in an intimate conversation with Mrs. Laura, Lygia's mother, to understand Eloisa's condition. Mrs. Laura explains that Eloisa is not joining them for meals as she is still unsettled and distressed. The family avoids having disturbed or unhappy individuals at the table due to the negative impact of their heavy and poisonous fluids on the food. Eloisa had spent 15 days in the umbral, a lower spiritual plane, in a deep sleep before coming under Mrs. Laura's direct care. André expresses his interest in visiting Eloisa to hear her story. In Eloisa's room, the young woman, pale and emotionally fragile, is introduced to André. Mrs. Laura provides background information on Eloisa's recent struggles with tuberculosis, her transmission of the disease to her caring mother, and the impact on her fiancé, Arnaldo. Eloisa, visibly upset, shares her emotional pain and suffering during the 8 months of battling tuberculosis. Mrs. Laura offers comforting words, highlighting the importance of optimism and courage. She reassures Eloisa that her mother will soon arrive, emphasizing that Arnaldo, the fiancé, is not prepared for a sincere spiritual commitment. Mrs. Laura urges Eloisa to be optimistic, suggesting that Arnaldo will recover quickly and marry someone else. The conversation delves into the challenges of love on Earth and the need to consider the well-being of others. Eloisa is shocked to learn about Arnaldo's potential connection with another woman, Maria de Luz. The chapter concludes with Eloisa in tears and Mrs. Laura explaining that her tears stem from human egoism and vanity. She assures André that Eloisa's situation will improve with time and serenity. Chapter 20. Notions of Home delves into the educational values that naturally arise from Mrs. Laura's conversation. André Luiz expresses curiosity about Mrs. Laura's responsibilities outside the home, considering her numerous duties. Mrs. Laura explains that although they live in a transitional city, the colony's primary focus is on work and learning. Female souls in the colony take on various responsibilities, preparing to return to Earth or ascend to higher spheres. André inquires about the domestic organization in Nosso Lar compared to Earth. Mrs. Laura, with a significant expression, explains that earthly homes have long tried to emulate their domestic institute, but many couples on Earth are still struggling with personal vanity, jealousy, and selfishness, preventing the true harmony that exists in their homes. Mrs. Laura recounts her own experience of returning from Earth with deep illusions, only to have her perspective changed by a great instructor in the Ministry of Enlightenment. She shares lessons received from a mathematically proficient mentor who emphasized the home as a sacred vertex where men and women come together spiritually before physically. Mrs. Laura discusses the gradual progress of Earth in understanding the essential divine institution of the home. André is deeply impressed by these concepts, expressing a wish for people on Earth to know about them. Mrs. Laura explains that such understanding comes through experience, and people will learn through suffering and struggle. She emphasizes that the home is a divine institution that should be lived with heart and soul, but currently, many earthly couples live in indifference or fierce selfishness after the honeymoon phase. The discussion touches on the current state of earthly marriages, highlighting the lack of true soulmate unions and the prevalence of forced relationships. Mrs. Laura then addresses the role of women, stating that they must learn to be mothers, wives, missionaries, and sisters. The chapter concludes with Mrs. Laura explaining the importance of balancing domestic inspiration and external activities for both men and women. Chapter 21. Continuing the lecture, André Luiz expresses his interest in Mrs. Laura's insights and wonders if his questions might be considered intrusive. Mrs. Laura encourages him to ask freely, assuring him that she may not be in a position to teach, but she can provide information. André inquires about the concept of property in the colony. Mrs. Laura explains that, similar to Earth, property in their realm is relative and acquired through hours of work. The bonus hour serves as their currency, and constructions are communal property under the governance's control. Families can earn a home through dedicated work, and Mrs. Laura shares the story of how her husband worked diligently to provide them with a home upon her arrival. She recounts her struggles as a widow on Earth, emphasizing the value of honest labor for the elevation and defense of the soul. Reuniting with her husband, Ricardo, in Nosso Lar brought her immense happiness. Over the years, they worked together for their spiritual evolution, and their family grew with the addition of Lygias, Iolanda, and Judy. Mrs. Laura then delves into the decision to return to Earth. Despite the current joy, the law of rhythm required them to face their past for a harmonious future. This discussion deeply affects André, as it is the first time he hears about past incarnations in such detail within the colony. André interrupts, seeking information about his own spiritual past. Mrs. Laura explains that it is essential to shed physical impressions before delving into past memories. She and her husband consulted the assistant Longobardo and underwent psychic operations to access 3 centuries of complete memories. The chapter concludes with Mrs. Laura revealing that her husband, Ricardo, has already returned to Earth 3 years ago, and she plans to follow soon, awaiting the arrival of Teresa, their daughter, before departing. Mrs. Laura also mentions the imminent arrival of Eloise's mother, who, due to her profound sacrifices, will have a brief passage through the umbral and won't require regeneration treatments. Mrs. Laura expresses confidence in the Lord's remembrance of them. Chapter 22. The Bonus Hour. André Luiz shifts the conversation to inquire about the bonus hour. Mrs. Laura explains that it is not a physical coin, but an individual service token functioning as purchasing power. In Nosso Lar, basic clothing and food production are communal, and everyone contributes to the collective wealth. Those who work earn rights, and while every resident receives necessary provisions, those who strive for the bonus hour gain certain social privileges. Residents can acquire a home if they earn 30,000 bonus hours through dedicated work. Mrs. Laura describes the system, where individuals must contribute at least 8 hours of useful service daily, with the option of an additional 4 hours for those willing to collaborate voluntarily. The bonus hours earned vary based on the type of service, with some services considered sacrificial earning double or triple rewards. André questions whether bonus hours are the only form of remuneration. Mrs. Laura explains that it is the standard payment for all colony collaborators, both in administration and obedience. She emphasizes that earthly prejudices about the nature of work and its remuneration need to be set aside. Mrs. Laura argues that earthly gains are transient and that the value of service lies in spiritual growth. The bonus hour is modified in value depending on the nature of the service. Different ministries have specific bonus hour categories, such as the bonus hour regeneration or bonus hour enlightenment. Mrs. Laura stresses that the true gain for individuals is spiritual, and the bonus hour represents the essence of their service. Residents can share their earned bonus hours with friends, and the more one works, the greater intercessions they can make. Mrs. Laura addresses André's question about inheritance, explaining that personal bonus hours cannot be inherited and revert to the commonwealth. However, individuals can intercede for their families and prepare work and friendly support during their return to Earth. As Mrs. Laura concludes her explanation, a gentle commotion signals the return of loved ones, prompting her to rise and attend to them. Chapter 23. Learning to Listen. André Luiz expresses disappointment at the interruption of the discussion with Mrs. Laura. Lygia's, visibly content, invites André to the garden to witness the moonlight. The beautiful scenery overwhelms André, who, accustomed to hospital seclusion, is now experiencing the breathtaking landscape of the Ministry of Assistance. Lygia's explains that the collective effort of the residents not to harbor negative thoughts contributes to a continuous state of prayer, creating an atmosphere of peace. Returning inside, Lygia's introduces André to a device resembling earthly radios, but tuned to subtler vibrational forces rather than terrestrial broadcasts. André inquires about the possibility of receiving news from Earth, particularly about distant relatives. Lygia's explains that initially, residents were connected to earthly news, causing anxiety and disturbances. However, the governor, influenced by a generous minister, restricted the exchange. Lygia's argues that on Earth, people tend to focus excessively on familial bonds, creating distractions from broader principles of fraternity. André suggests that receiving news about loved ones on Earth might bring comfort. Lygia's, near the radio but not activating it, questions André's readiness to maintain serenity upon hearing distressing news. He emphasizes the importance of spiritual preparedness before engaging in communication with Earth. Lygia's discourages unnecessary contact with earthly vibrations, stressing the potential for imbalance and negative consequences. Despite André's persistence, Lygia's insists on avoiding communication with lower vibrational levels and highlights the importance of knowing how to speak and listen. The chapter ends with André silently observing as Lygia's prepares to demonstrate the art of spiritual listening using the reception control device. Chapter 24. The Impressive Appeal. André Luiz and Lygia's listen to a broadcast from the spirit colony, Moridia, through a special receptor. The announcer urges spiritual workers to join efforts in preserving moral balance on Earth due to impending conflicts. The broadcast describes the dark forces of the umbral influencing nations and calls for cooperation in combating these negative influences. The announcer reveals the dense fog of war gathering over Europe, emphasizing the need for spiritual assistance in political offices. Some governments are criticized for being centralized and resistant to spiritual collaboration. The message implores for help in preserving the tranquility of humanity and defending the cultural heritage of Western civilization. Lygia's explains to André that the world is on the brink of significant battles, despite the bloodshed of the recent World War. The broadcast, marked by urgency, seeks support from higher spiritual fraternities to counteract the forces of ignorance and darkness. The announcer encourages listeners to unite against the impending suffering and tribulations. As the broadcast ends, Lygia's, visibly moved, expresses admiration for the selfless efforts of the spirits from Moridia. Despite the honest appeals, Lysias reveals that the situation on Earth is critical, and the collective humanity will soon face severe consequences due to its indulgence in pride, vanity, and selfishness. Lysias, choosing not to delve deeper into the grim topic, invites André to withdraw, ending the chapter. Chapter 25. Generous Offer. André Luiz starts the day with a light meal in the company of Lysias and his family. Before Lysias' children leave for their work at the Ministry of Assistance, Mrs. Laura informs André that their family friend Raphael, an employee of the Ministry of Regeneration, will pick him up. Raphael will introduce André to Minister Genesio. André is overjoyed and expresses his gratitude. Lysias is also happy and warmly embraces André before leaving. Mrs. Laura instructs Lysias to inform Minister Clarencio of her intention to attend work once André is in Raphael's care. Alone with André, Mrs. Laura offers him some maternal advice for his new journey. She encourages him to move beyond mere curiosity and to focus on meaningful work. Mrs. Laura emphasizes the importance of service over idle curiosity, cautioning André against aimlessly observing without contributing. She reminds him that the Ministry of Regeneration involves challenging tasks, and he should not feel humiliated by humble assignments. Mrs. Laura encourages André to convert his observations into useful tasks and to remember that the spirit of investigation should follow the spirit of service. She advises him to build a circle of friendships, concentrate on his work, and not be distracted by the desire to witness activities in other ministries. Touched by Mrs. Laura's words, André expresses his deep appreciation. Mrs. Laura concludes her advice by highlighting the nobility of learning the science of starting anew, citing examples like the Apostle Paul's decision to restart his life as a humble weaver. Overwhelmed with gratitude, André takes Mrs. Laura's hands and sheds tears of joy. She reassures him, expressing her belief in their interconnected friendship. As someone knocks on the door, Mrs. Laura tells André that Raphael has come to take him. She encourages him to go, thinking of Jesus and working for the well-being of others to find his own happiness. Chapter 26. New Perspectives. André Luiz reflects on the wise and affectionate advice he received from Lysias' mother. Accompanying Raphael, André is now determined to focus on learning and useful service rather than mere observation. While traveling to meet Minister Genesio, André is silent, engaging in a new mental activity of prayer. Previously averse to prayer, he now finds it valuable for aligning his sentiments with the purpose of service. Arriving at the Ministry of Regeneration, André meets the kind and energetic Minister Genesio, who is informed of André's arrival by Laura. Raphael, after introducing André, departs for his urgent tasks. Genesio expresses his interest in André, mentioning the frequent visits from the Ministry of Assistance. André affirms his desire to learn and serve, acknowledging that his place may be in regenerative activities. Genesio appreciates André's sincerity and prays for his worthy position. Encouraged by Genesio, André expresses his realization of wasting time in vain pursuits and egotism. Genesio acknowledges André's sincerity and advises him to focus on the spirit of service, assuring him that when a servant is ready, opportunities for service appear. Genesio calls for Tobias, a helpful associate, to guide André through the chambers of rectification. Tobias offers to accompany André, and Genesio embraces André with encouraging words as he embarks on new experiences in the Ministry of Regeneration. Chapter 27. Work at Last. André Luiz is confronted with an unexpected and distressing scene as he enters a series of interconnected chambers within the Ministry of Regeneration. Instead of a typical hospital or health treatment center, these chambers are filled with the spiritual remnants of individuals in extreme suffering. André witnesses the miserable state of these souls, marked by groans, sobs, and agonizing phrases. Overwhelmed by the distressing sight, André turns to prayer for strength. Tobias, his guide, explains that many assistants are absent, having joined the Samaritans in the regions of Umbral, requiring them to multiply their efforts. Tobias attends to a suffering patient named Ribeiro, who had experienced a crisis due to the negative thoughts emitted by his incarnated relatives. André observes the patient's painful condition and learns that Ribeiro had left without permission, driven by thoughts of his family. Tobias had applied passes to weaken him temporarily for his own benefit. As André and Tobias move through the chambers, they encounter other patients, witnessing the agonizing conditions caused by mental and emotional afflictions. Tobias explains that these individuals are dealing with the consequences of their own negative thoughts and actions. The chapter explores the consequences of misguided earthly pursuits and attachments. André questions the apparent misery surrounding him, and Tobias enlightens him about the misguided beliefs of these suffering souls who held on to material values without understanding spiritual principles. As Tobias and André continue their work, they enter a large ward where patients, referred to as negative believers, are in a deep, troubled sleep. Tobias performs healing passes, leading to the expulsion of dark and foul substances from the patients. The chapter concludes with André actively participating in the cleansing process, experiencing a profound sense of joy as he embraces the opportunity for self-education through humble service in the rudimentary nursing of these suffering souls. Chapter 28, In Service, unfolds with a collective prayer at dusk, followed by Tobias connecting the receptor to listen to the Samaritans in action at Umbral. André, still curious, learns that the operations teams communicate with the task rear during conventional hours. Despite feeling somewhat tired from his intense efforts, André is filled with inner joy and gratitude for the opportunity to engage in meaningful work. The spirit of service provides him with a mysterious vigor. As Tobias establishes electrical contact, a small device begins transmitting a message. The Samaritans report their activities in the Umbral, sharing that they have rescued a large number of suffering spirits. André is puzzled about the need for mass transportation, questioning Tobias about it. Tobias explains that spirits arriving from Earth or the Umbral are encumbered with heavy fluids and compares them to birds, stating that some need assistance to rise to higher spiritual realms. Tobias informs André about the urgency of accommodating the rescued spirits in specific pavilions. André volunteers to assist during the night shift, expressing his readiness to recover lost time. Tobias appreciates André's offer and assigns him to work alongside Narcissa, Venancio, and Celestio, overseeing the reception and care of the incoming spirits. André actively participates in the preparations, experiencing profound joy despite physical exertion. Tobias, before leaving, embraces André and wishes peace, a good night, and useful service. André, surrounded by numerous caregivers, engages with the patients, particularly drawn to the kindness of Narcissa. He learns about her dedicated service for over 6 years, working towards spiritual elevation and a specific mission on Earth. Narcissa's commitment inspires André, who refrains from holding her back for personal curiosity, respecting her role as a compassionate spiritual mother to the suffering souls. Chapter 29, Francisco's Vision. André is called to the urban communication device while Narcissa consoles a distressed patient. It is Mrs. Laura, Lygia's mother, seeking news. André apologizes for not informing her about the night service decisions and provides a brief verbal report. Mrs. Laura encourages André to be passionate about his work, reminding him that Nosso Lar is also his home. Returning to the patients, André observes Narcissa calming a young man, Francisco, who is tormented by disturbing visions. Francisco is terrified, claiming to see a monstrous figure and feeling haunted by fear. Narcissa uses soothing words and magnetic passes to help him, emphasizing the need for his effort in expelling negative thoughts. Curious about Francisco's condition, André learns from Narcissa that he is tormented by the vision of his own dead body. Attached to his physical form, Francisco spent time near his earthly remains in a state of denial about his spiritual existence. Despite efforts from higher spheres, he resisted thoughts of eternal life. Eventually, the suffering drove him away from the grave and into the lower regions of Umbral, from where the Samaritans brought him to the colony. Narcissa also reveals that Francisco's father, currently on a risky mission, visited him twice, trying to offer comfort and healing. Touched by the story, André expresses his emotional response. Narcissa explains that the vision of the corpse is a common nightmare for spirits who cling excessively to their physical bodies. She reflects on the profound spiritual slumber of many earthly beings, drawing analogies to the chrysalis, seed, and dormant embryo as metaphors for spiritual potential. Narcissa's words resonate deeply with André, leaving him in thoughtful silence. Chapter 30. Inheritance and Euthanasia. André is informed by Celestio that Paulina, their sister, wishes to visit their ailing father in Pavilion 5. Before proceeding, André consults Narcissa, the nurse attending to the patient, seeking her guidance due to the critical condition of the father. Narcissa, displaying characteristic kindness, permits Paulina's visit, explaining that she has permission from the minister and is working towards reconciling family members. Paulina, a devoted daughter, arrives moments later, dressed elegantly in a luminous silk tunic. Despite her angelic beauty, her eyes reveal deep concern. Narcissa introduces Paulina to André, expressing confidence in his presence. The father, with a disconcerting appearance, is described as pitiable rather than sympathetic, evoking André's initial repulsion, which he endeavors to overcome. As Paulina addresses her father with affection, he responds with bitterness and accuses Adalberto, a family member, of poisoning him. Paulina attempts to encourage forgiveness and understanding, citing Jesus' lesson of loving one another. She emphasizes the importance of family unity and spiritual love, urging her father to see Adalberto not as a wayward son, but as a brother in need of enlightenment. Paulina describes the turmoil in the family, including their mother's mental breakdown, legal disputes among siblings, and the misuse of the substantial inheritance left by the father. She criticizes the family's focus on material wealth and their neglect of spiritual growth. The father, in turn, expresses resentment and accuses Adalberto of betraying him. Narcissa intervenes, signaling Celestio to assist the distressed patient. Paulina, caressing her father's forehead, tries to maintain composure. After the emotional encounter, André, Paulina, and Narcissa engage in further conversation, during which Paulina reveals that Adalberto had facilitated a form of euthanasia for their father, hastening his death for financial reasons. Narcissa reflects on the complications arising from inheritance disputes, noting that they often burden both the legators and the legatees. In this specific case, she observes not only familial conflicts over inheritance, but also the tragic consequences of euthanasia driven by financial greed. Narcissa laments how the pursuit of wealth has created oddities and discord within Paulina's family, turning parents into misers and children into spendthrifts. She recalls attempting to prevent the euthanasia, but was unsuccessful, leading to the current state of animosity and illness in the family. Narcissa concludes with a poignant remark, expressing how humans, despite being created by God in harmony with the heavens, often transform themselves into demonic spirits, crafting their individual hells. The chapter sheds light on the destructive impact of materialism, familial discord, and the ethical considerations surrounding euthanasia. Chapter 31. Vampire. The narrative unfolds at 9 p.m. in the spiritual realm. André and Narcissa have been engaged in spiritual duties, providing relief and passes to those in need. They receive word of commotion in Pavilion 11, and despite André's instinct to investigate, Narcissa advises against it, revealing it to be an area housing disturbed individuals of the opposite sex. She urges André to withhold his emotions for the time being. Later, a humble worker named Justino arrives with a distressing message about a woman seeking help near the main gate. Narcissa learns that the woman is surrounded by dark entities, and Justino couldn't assist her per the orders governing their actions. Intrigued, André follows Narcissa to the scene, where they encounter a pitiful woman covered in rags, her face and legs bearing open sores. Narcissa perceives more than André can, indicating the presence of black spots. Narcissa suggests seeking permission from the chief watchman, Ermeo Paulo, to assist the distressed woman. The trio approaches the chief watchman, who examines the newcomer from the umbral, revealing her to be an exceptionally strong vampire. Despite André's shock, Ermeo Paulo decides not to provide aid, emphasizing the need to leave her to her fate. Outraged by this decision, André questions the ethical duty to abandon a suffering soul. Narcissa, echoing André's sentiment, pleads for mercy and offers to personally care for the woman. However, Ermeo Paulo asserts that the woman's intention is to disrupt their work, as her hardened feelings emit destructive forces. He emphasizes the importance of vigilance in their service. The chief watchman engages the woman, questioning her desires for their fraternal assistance. The woman, in a tearful plea, seeks refuge for her weary soul and inquires about the promised paradise for the chosen ones. Ermeo Paulo reveals that she is a particularly strong vampire, responsible for the deaths of 58 newborns. He explains that her actions were far worse than those of suicide or homicide perpetrators. Narcissa, moved by compassion, requests special care for the woman. Ermeo Paulo acknowledges their shared indebtedness as spirits, but reiterates the woman's disruptive intent. The woman, reacting with anger, labels Ermeo Paulo as a demon and refuses to return. Firmly, Ermeo Paulo instructs her to leave, emphasizing that their realm is a place of work and healing for those willing to recognize their faults and seek redemption. Observing the departing woman, Ermeo Paulo concludes the lesson, cautioning against being deceived by appearances. He acknowledges that, while the woman will eventually receive divine mercy elsewhere, opening their doors to her would contradict the principles of charity. This chapter delves into the challenges of discerning genuine repentance and the consequences of deeply rooted negative intentions in the spiritual realm. The ethical dilemma of providing aid to a suffering soul, even one with a dark past, is explored, highlighting the complexities of spiritual service in the afterlife. Chapter 32. News from Veneranda. André continues his exploration of the illuminated park, captivated by its enchanting atmosphere. Narcissa seizes the opportunity to provide explanations about the multifaceted purposes of the park. She reveals that it is not merely a passageway to the umbral or a cultivation ground for nourishing plants. It also serves as the location for the green halls, spaces dedicated to educational services. Narcissa describes the green halls as places for conferences involving the ministers of regeneration, visiting ministers, and scholars. One particularly beautiful hall is reserved for the governor's discussions, adorned with blooming flowers that resemble small colorful towers against the sky. These halls, part of Minister Veneranda's visionary plans, contribute significantly to the educational processes in the spirit realm. André, intrigued, inquires about the furniture in these halls. Narcissa explains that the minister has designed benches and chairs sculpted from the earth's substance, covered with fragrant and soft grass. This natural furniture adds beauty and unique characteristics to the halls, aligning with Minister Veneranda's vision inspired by the scenes of Christ's teachings by the Tiberias. Narcissa then shares details about the most beautiful hall, reserved for the governor's talks. Inspired by Hellenic landscapes, it features water channels, graceful bridges, miniature lakes, and tree-lined palanquins. The scenery changes each month, corresponding to the evolving flowers, reaching its peak of beauty in December to commemorate Jesus' nativity. The enchanting green halls extend to educational parks, where Minister Veneranda created a star-shaped castle surrounded by 5 classes and instructors. Using a cinematographic device, 5 simultaneous projections can be displayed for diverse learning experiences, blending practical utility with spiritual beauty. As André absorbs the information, Narcissa pauses, but sensing his continued interest, she elaborates on Minister Veneranda's exceptional contributions. The minister is hailed as one of the most elevated spirits in the colony, with more than 200 years of active service in Nosso Lar. She is renowned for her tireless dedication, serving as a guiding force in the ministry of regeneration. Narcissa emphasizes Minister Veneranda's humility, recounting a special tribute she received from the Fraternities of Light, honoring her with the Merit of Service Medal. Despite protests and celebrations, Minister Veneranda quietly handed the trophy to the city archives, insisting that she did not deserve it and attributing it to the collective effort of the colony. Impressed by Minister Veneranda's extraordinary character, André wonders why she hasn't ascended to higher spheres. Narcissa reveals that she chooses to remain in Nosso Lar out of love and sacrifice, working for over 1,000 years to assist beloved souls on Earth. Intrigued, André expresses a desire to meet her, and Narcissa informs him that the minister will be present in the hall the following evening to enlighten apprentices on the power of thought. Chapter 33. Curious Observations. André is granted permission by Narcissa to go to the Grand Gate of the Chambers a few minutes before midnight. The Samaritans, spiritual beings responsible for assisting souls in need, were expected in the vicinity, requiring André to observe their surroundings and take necessary actions. As André walks along the tree-lined path, he reflects on the enchanting atmosphere of the illuminated park. The trees, reminiscent of Earth's ancient oaks and acacias, emit a fragrant blessing. Despite the wide windows in the chambers, André feels a greater sense of well-being under the comforting foliage, surrounded by gentle winds. Contemplating recent events since his encounter with Minister Clarencio, André questions the nature of his dreamlike existence. Is it in the spiritual colony or still tied to Earth? Concerns about his family, particularly his wife Celia and children, linger. André wonders why he is receiving profound insights into various aspects of life in the afterlife while being kept in the dark about his earthly family. He grapples with conflicting emotions, torn between the desire to forget earthly concerns and the profound yearning for his loved ones. André recognizes his shortcomings as a husband and father, realizing the missed opportunities to nurture his family's spiritual growth. Despite regrets, he acknowledges the need for self-renewal and contemplates the constructive work happening in Nosso Lar. As André introspects, he is interrupted by the gentle breeze whispering profound concepts, urging him to elevate his thoughts. Troubled by internal inquiries, André approaches the Grand Gate to survey the surrounding fields, bathed in moonlight and serenity. In the distance, André observes two enormous figures with indistinct, semi-luminous substance. Initially perceiving them as ghosts, he rushes back to the interior, frightened. When he shares the encounter with Narcissa, she reveals that the figures are powerful spirits from Earth on a redemptive mission, capable of temporarily leaving their physical bodies. Encouraged by Narcissa, André returns to the gate to witness the approaching Samaritans. He notices 6 large carriage-like vehicles pulled by animals resembling earthly mules and accompanied by packs of energetic dogs. Unusual birds, called ibis travelers, fly above the carriages, emitting unique sounds. Curious about the absence of the aerobus and the use of animals in the umbral, André questions Narcissa. She explains that the density of matter in the umbral prevents the aerobus from functioning, and animals serve essential roles, aiding in various tasks and combating negative energies. As the caravan draws closer, Narcissa instructs André to focus on learning about animals in the Ministry of Enlightenment study and experimentation parks. The chapter concludes as Narcissa prepares for her duty to receive new spiritual patients, leaving André to ponder the mysteries of the spiritual realm. Chapter 34. The newly arrived from the umbral. André and Narcissa witness the arrival of new spirits from the umbral, accompanied by packs of dogs and Samaritan workers. The scene unfolds at the entrance to the Chambers of Rectification, where everyone, including André, Narcissa, Celestio, and other companions, engages in assisting and welcoming the newcomers. The Samaritans and workers are actively involved in helping the distressed souls. Some patients display humility and resignation, while others loudly voice their complaints. André notices an elderly woman struggling to descend from one of the carriages, and he offers assistance. The elderly woman expresses surprise and gratitude for escaping the purgatory and describes her tormenting experiences in the umbral. She speaks of demonic entities and the intervention of the angels of the Lord. André, intrigued, engages her in conversation, discovering that she comes from a distant place. As the woman shares her story, André learns about her life on Earth, including her charitable acts, devotion, and harsh treatment of slaves. She justifies her actions based on religious teachings and confesses her reliance on monthly masses for spiritual peace. André, appalled by her revelations, attempts to impart a different perspective on the equality of all souls. The woman adamantly defends her beliefs, emphasizing the inferiority of slaves and justifying her actions based on societal norms and the guidance of her virtuous priest, Padre Amancio. She recalls her abrupt departure from the physical body in 1888, coinciding with the emancipation of slaves, which she strongly disapproved of. Narcissa intervenes, reminding André of their primary mission to assist the disturbed spirits. She discourages him from engaging in discussions that divert spiritual interest, comparing such interactions to dealing with the mentally unstable. Despite Narcissa's advice, André continues his conversation with the elderly woman, attempting to elevate her thoughts. However, Narcissa steps in again, redirecting the focus to providing relief to the disturbed soul. She instructs an assistant to call for another nurse, Nemesia, to attend to the newly arrived spirit's needs. The chapter ends with Narcissa gracefully managing the situation and André reflecting on the challenges of dealing with spirits carrying deeply ingrained beliefs and prejudices from their earthly lives. Chapter 35. A singular encounter. André experiences a unique meeting with an acquaintance from his past, the old Silvera, whom André's father had once stripped of all his possessions due to a business transaction. As preparations are made for the excursion and service animals are gathered, Silvera warmly greets André, expressing surprise and delight at seeing him in Nosso Lar. Feeling a sense of shame and awkwardness due to the past actions of his father, André struggles to respond to Silvera's friendly gestures. However, Silvera, understanding the situation, offers words of understanding and forgiveness, allowing André to embrace him with gratitude. André recalls the unfortunate events that led to Silvera's financial ruin on Earth. Silvera and his family had faced dire circumstances, and André's father had shown no mercy in pursuing the legal course of action, leading to the Silvera family's complete financial ruin. André's memories include the distressing scene of Silvera's piano being taken away to satisfy the demands of the relentless creditor. Wanting to apologize and make amends, André finds himself unable to articulate the right words. He seeks advice from Narcissa, who shares her own experience of encountering those she had wronged in the past. Narcissa encourages André to take the opportunity to reconcile and mend broken spiritual bonds. As André approaches Silvera, he is hesitant, but eventually opens up about the past, asking for forgiveness on behalf of his father and himself. Silvera responds with deep understanding, expressing that everyone is prone to errors and acknowledging the lessons learned from the challenging experiences. Silvera emphasizes the transformative nature of spiritual progress and extends his willingness to visit André's father in the future. The encounter leaves André with a newfound sense of joy and the perception that a divine light has ignited within his heart. The chapter underscores the theme of reconciliation and the opportunity for spiritual growth through genuine remorse and forgiveness. Chapter 36. The Dream. As the services continued relentlessly, attending to the sick and providing care to the disturbed, I found myself integrated into the process of spiritual passes by nightfall, applying them to those in need. Tobias, upon his return in the morning, encouraged me for my initial efforts, promising recommendations to Minister Genesio. Mrs. Laura and Lygias expressed their satisfaction, sharing the news with me that Minister Clarencio had commended my work. Despite Mrs. Laura's invitation to rest at their home, Tobias offered me a resting place adjacent to the rectification chambers. Feeling the need for sleep, I accepted. In a spacious and comfortable room prepared by Narcissa, I thanked the Lord for the blessing of being useful. Soon after, I felt a sense of lightness engulfing my soul, as if being carried in a small boat to unknown regions. I found myself in a marvelous port where my mother warmly called my name. In an ineffable landscape of illuminated flowers and golden carpets, my mother, radiating sublime beauty, spoke of the divine tonic of service. She emphasized the joy in giving and the importance of converting life's opportunities into attention to God. Overwhelmed with emotions and guided by sacred spiritual insights, my mother conveyed the significance of spiritual work. She concluded with the wisdom that God, the vigilant administrator and devoted father, values time spent in learning and rewards those who know how to renounce. My mother's tenderness enveloped me as I lost consciousness, only to awaken later in the rectification chambers with a profound sense of joy. Chapter 37. The Minister's Lecture. In the course of the next day's work, my curiosity was piqued by the upcoming lecture from Minister Veneranda. After obtaining permission from Tobias, I was allowed to attend, along with hundreds of interested spirits from the Ministries of Regeneration and Aid. The day was spent actively in service, and the insights from my mother regarding the value of time and the bonus hour resonated in my mind. As the appointed hour for the minister's lecture approached, I, along with Narcissa and Celestio, headed to the grand open-air hall. The assembly was a marvel, surrounded by greenery and adorned with various flowers. Over 1,000 attendees gathered, with 20 prominent spirits seated near us, ready to interact with the minister. Minister Veneranda, radiating joy, entered with 2 distinguished ladies, ministers of communication. Despite her name, she exhibited the countenance of a noble lady in her mature years, devoid of affectation. Commencing her talk on thought, Minister Veneranda emphasized the universal language of thought and the paramount role of mental creation in our spiritual life. She urged reflection on the power of thought and the need to align our mental energy with divine principles. Explaining the symbolic nature of mental creation, she used the analogy of water returning purified after ascending to the heavens. Minister Veneranda underscored the importance of understanding the role of thought in our lives and the consequences of our mental creations. The minister concluded the lecture with a graceful question, and as attendees rose, she ended the session without formalities, leaving the audience in continued contemplation. Chapter 38. The Tobias Case. André experiences a pleasant surprise on the 3rd day of work when Tobias invites him to his residence for an evening of joy and learning. There, André is introduced to Tobias's wife, Luciana, and sister, Hilda. The group explores Tobias's beautiful library, examining spiritually rich volumes. Later, Hilda takes André to the garden, showcasing various flower arrangements. Each house in Nosso Lar specializes in cultivating specific flowers. Luciana invites them inside for a light meal, and André is enchanted by the warm and fraternal atmosphere. During a friendly conversation, Tobias reveals that he has been married twice, introducing Luciana and Hilda as his current wife and sister, respectively. André, surprised, learns that both women shared Tobias's experiences on Earth. Tobias and André discuss the complex issue of second marriages in the spirit realm. Tobias emphasizes the importance of genuine fraternity and recognizes that true marriage is of souls, unbreakable by external circumstances. Hilda and Luciana share their personal experiences. Hilda explains her initial struggles with Tobias's second marriage and how a visit from her deceased grandmother, guided by Jesus, helped her overcome jealousy. Luciana adds that she learned about higher forms of marriage through the examples of Tobias and Hilda. The group concludes that spiritual marriages are based on love, fraternity, trial, and duty. André, curious, asks about the process of marriage in the spiritual realm, and Tobias explains that it occurs through vibrational harmony or complete affinity. Luciana clarifies that their marriage is primarily a spiritual union, transcending physical ties. The discussion ends abruptly as Tobias is urgently called to attend a serious case in the chambers of rectification, bringing the pleasant gathering to a close. Chapter 39. Listening to Mrs. Laura. André is deeply impressed by Tobias's case and finds himself troubled by the unconventional principles of fraternal unity observed in Tobias's household. As someone still attached to earthly concepts of family, André questions whether he would have the courage to follow Tobias's example. He seeks explanations and decides to visit Mrs. Laura, the mother of Lygia's, whom he trusts. After waiting for a suitable moment, André discusses his concerns with Mrs. Laura, expressing his unease about the situation he witnessed at Tobias's home. Mrs. Laura, with her vast life experience, advises André to consider the spiritual perspective and understand the evolutionary sequence of life. Mrs. Laura emphasizes the need to prioritize spiritual principles over human sentiments. She explains that the evolution from animalistic tendencies takes time, and humanity must gradually embrace higher ideals. André wonders if the experiences of Tobias and others are universal rules, to which Mrs. Laura responds by cautioning against radicalism and stressing the importance of understanding the vibrational nature of spiritual constructions. As André queries about the fate of souls that fail such tests and are not admitted to higher spiritual realms, Mrs. Laura explains that they undergo painful experiences, and after facing hardships, they return to earthly life to rectify their mistakes. The forgetfulness of past events allows them to rebuild relationships, often within the framework of family ties. Mrs. Laura concludes by emphasizing the significance of forgiveness and the seriousness of the issue, stating that forgiveness goes beyond words. It requires inner transformation and the release of burdens from past eras. The conversation prompts André to reflect on the importance of fraternity and understanding. In the end, Mrs. Laura invites André to visit Eloisa, a recent arrival from Earth, signaling the end of their discussion on the complex topic of spiritual relationships and the imperative of human fraternity. Chapter 40: Who Sows Shall Reap. André, guided by an inexplicable attraction, expresses his desire to visit the women's department of the Chambers of Rectification. Narcissa offers to accompany him, emphasizing the significance of following divine guidance in seemingly casual visits. They find Nemesia, a dedicated collaborator in the department, who leads them to the section where suffering women are undergoing spiritual healing. André observes the distressing scenes and notices Elisa, a woman from his past, now aged prematurely and burdened with suffering. Elisa, once employed in André's home, had left under strained circumstances due to inappropriate behavior. André, feeling responsible for her plight, confides in Narcissa, seeking guidance. Narcissa encourages him to approach Elisa with compassion and understanding, assuring him that the encounter is an opportunity for spiritual growth. As André and Narcissa approach Elisa, André initiates a comforting conversation. Elisa, temporarily blind, shares her life's painful journey, from impoverished beginnings to indulgence in destructive experiences. She confesses her errors, acknowledges her own role in the consequences, and recounts her redemption through the intervention of benevolent spirits. Overwhelmed with remorse, André seeks confirmation of whether she harbors resentment toward him. Elisa, now transformed by humility, expresses forgiveness and rejects hatred, recognizing shared responsibility for past mistakes. Touched by her humility, André offers his support and declares her his spiritual sister. Elisa, deeply moved, appreciates the genuine friendship and blessings received. As emotions intensify, Narcissa, with maternal warmth, reassures André and Elisa, invoking the blessings of Jesus upon them. The chapter highlights the themes of forgiveness, redemption, and the consequences of one's actions, emphasizing the transformative power of love and understanding. Chapter 41, Called to Battle. In September 1939, Nosso Lar experiences the shockwaves of the European War, echoing across various spiritual colonies connected to American civilization. The destructive war on Earth also causes disturbance in the spiritual realm. Numerous entities discuss the impending conflict with immense dread. The great fraternities of the East had been struggling with the conflicting vibrations from Japan for some time. Now, Nosso Lar prepares for a similar service. The governor emphasizes the importance of maintaining noble thoughts and avoiding unworthy inclinations during these challenging times. André learns that in such circumstances, superior spirits view aggressor nations not as enemies, but as disruptors whose criminal activities must be restrained. Tobias and Narcissa explain the spiritual dynamics, where aggressor nations become powerful centers of evil forces. Despite the dangers, they become instruments of malevolent influences, transforming industrious communities into centers of perversion and horror. A celestial trumpet is sounded, signifying a call to service for Earth. Tobias explains that this clarion call is used by vigilant spirits of high hierarchical expression. André, Tobias, and Narcissa observe points of light in the sky, representing spiritual beings mobilizing to aid the afflicted. Later, in the halls of rectification, another trumpet call is heard, stirring deep emotions. Tobias explains that this call signals a need for assistance to Earth during times of great spiritual turmoil. The community is called to respond with love and support. The narrative shifts to the citizens of Nosso Lar who are seeking information about the war. Tobias and André witness the anticipation and discussions among various groups. A message from the governor urges everyone to remain calm and focused on their duties. The chapter highlights the spiritual response to global conflicts and emphasizes the importance of maintaining a higher perspective in times of turmoil. Chapter 42. The Governor's Address. Following the trumpet call, the governor announces a Sunday service at the Ministry of Regeneration, focusing on preparing new assistance schools in Auxilio and training centers in regeneration. Narcissa emphasizes the need for training against fear due to its destructive effects on spiritual well-being. The day before the event, André participates in cleaning and decorating the hall dedicated to the colony's leader, feeling anxious to see the revered governor for the first time. The entire community converges on the hall, and a grand celebration begins with hymns and melodies resonating through the spiritual landscape. The governor, an elderly figure radiating wisdom and energy, arrives accompanied by the 12 ministers of regeneration. He opens a luminous book, the Gospel of Jesus Christ, and reads a passage about the inevitability of wars. The governor then prays, invoking Christ's blessings, and acknowledges representatives from other ministries. Addressing the regeneration servants, the governor urges them to elevate their courage and spirit of service during these challenging times. He emphasizes the importance of training against fear and announces the need for 30,000 trained defenders to face the forces of crime and ignorance. He highlights the duty to defend Nosso Lar against disorderly spirits. The governor speaks of Jesus' sacrifice for redemption, but emphasizes the need to defend their spiritual home. He calls for a legion of workers focused on spiritual defense while organizing missions of love and fraternity. The governor concludes by repeating the verse from Matthew, invoking Jesus' blessings and expressing hope for a bright future. The chapter concludes with André feeling moved and captivated by the event, with gentle breezes carrying fragrant petals, symbolizing a moment of profound joy and hope. Chapter 43. In Conversation. In the aftermath of the governor's address, festivities persist at the Ministry of Regeneration, although the governor has withdrawn to a more intimate setting. Conversations abound among comrades who volunteer for the challenging defensive tasks, responding to the spiritual leader's call. André seeks advice from Tobias regarding his role in the efforts, but is advised not to rush into additional responsibilities. Tobias suggests focusing on the fear-fighting school, assuring André that there will be plenty of work, especially in the rear guard. Lygia's, part of the Ministry of Aid delegation, warmly embraces André, and they withdraw for a more intimate conversation. Lygia's informs André about Minister Benevenuto, recently returned from Poland, and takes him to meet this esteemed figure. Benevenuto shares his recent experiences in Poland, describing the dire conditions and the challenges faced during spiritual relief efforts. The conversation touches upon the lack of spiritual readiness in Europe and the painful scenes witnessed during the mission. Benevenuto emphasizes the importance of spiritual preparedness and the slow progress of Spiritism, acknowledging it as humanity's great hope. The discussion turns to the role of organized religion, and Benevenuto underscores the necessity for divine inspiration and the limitations of political priesthood. The topic of Spiritism arises, with Benevenuto recognizing it as a sublime gift, but expressing concern about the slow pace of spiritual evolution among its followers. Benevenuto concludes with optimism, stressing the astronomical scale of their services and encouraging everyone to fulfill their duties with hope, optimism, and the belief that by doing their part, they can remain in peace, trusting the Lord to do the rest. Chapter 44. The Darkness. Amid the joys of the gathering, Lygias enriches the atmosphere with his cultural and sensitive contributions. Skillfully playing the lyre, he evokes old songs and melodies from Earth, enhancing the already marvelous day with spiritual jubilation. Alone with the compassionate aid nurse, André shares his sublime impressions. Lysias explains the constructive and comforting effects when souls gather, emphasizing the nourishment derived from love. He highlights the influence of thoughts intertwining in circles, shaping vibrant forces where each receives their share of joy or sorrow. André draws parallels between these spiritual principles and life in human homes, where mutual understanding leads to happiness, while discord and malice create a living hell. Prompted by recent mentions of earthly circles, the umbral, and the darkness by the governor, André questions Lysias about the latter, as he has no prior knowledge of it. Lysias clarifies that darkness refers to the lowest regions known, inhabited by wandering souls. Some strive towards noble goals, while others stagnate, endlessly revisiting experiences. Lysias addresses André's curiosity about falls into darkness, explaining that, while they can happen anywhere, spiritual defenses are stronger in higher spheres, intensifying the guilt associated with wrongdoing. André, still grappling with the concept, questions whether falls occur only on Earth. Lysias responds that, indeed, falls can happen in any realm but are more prevalent in lower regions. The discussion turns to the nature of temptation. André, surprised, questions how spiritual environments, divine knowledge, and higher assistance may not act as infallible antidotes. Lysias explains that the complexity of temptation exists everywhere, even amid Earth's divine landscapes, where individuals commit crimes and indulge in selfish pursuits. André seeks clarification about the location of the darkness. Lysias emphasizes that life exists everywhere, including deep within the seas and the earth. He underscores the spiritual principles governing the ascent or descent of the soul, comparing them to the gravitational pull on material bodies. Lysias concludes that, just as the planet has both high and low expressions, it corrects the guilty and allows triumph for those directed toward eternal life. He likens this to the inner elements in the human brain that govern spiritual direction, emphasizing that those who embrace darkness will be drawn to it, each person arriving at their chosen destination. Chapter 45, In the Field of Music. In the evening, Lysias invited André to accompany him to the field of music, emphasizing the importance of taking some time for recreation. Despite André's initial reluctance, Lysias insisted, assuring him that Tobias had granted the day off for Narcissa. André had developed a deep affection for the chambers, cherishing the daily visits from Minister Genesio, the company of Narcissa, the inspiration from Tobias, and the camaraderie with fellow workers. Approaching Tobias with his request, André received the approval to explore the field of music. Tobias encouraged him to enjoy the outing and return whenever he wished, since all their services were well attended. Grateful, André followed Lysias to his residence in the Ministry of Assistance, where he had the chance to reconnect with Mrs. Laura and learn about the return of Eloisa's devoted mother from the earth. As they bid farewell, Mrs. Laura jokingly warned André about becoming a frequent visitor to the field of music and playfully suggested he be cautious with his heart. Lysias then informed André that he would finally meet his fiancée, Licinia, and mentioned the plans for their future home in the spirit realm. Upon reaching the outskirts of the field of music, surrounded by breathtaking lights, André marveled at the enchanting park. The illuminated fountains created stunning scenes, a spectacle unlike anything he had seen before. Lysias explained the various musical manifestations catering to different tastes at the edges of the field, while the center featured universal and divine music. As they strolled through flower-lined paths, André was captivated by the universal harmony emanating from the central area. In the heart of the field, André witnessed a gathering of the elite residents of Nosso Lar, displaying simplicity, natural beauty, and pure artistry. The atmosphere was filled with joy and constructive conversations. Lysias emphasized the absence of malice or accusation in their discussions about earthly circles, love, intellectual culture, scientific research, and uplifting philosophy. The gathering radiated optimism, and André noticed the harmonious exchange between the wise and the less educated, with everyone contributing to mutual understanding. Jesus and the gospel were remembered with joy and positivity, portraying the master as a compassionate guide with a keen sense of order and justice. Entranced by the sublime music and the uplifting atmosphere, Lysias explained how their mentors drew inspiration from higher planes, and earthly composers were sometimes brought to their spheres, adding their genius to the melodies. Lysias concluded his explanation as they encountered a graceful group. Licinia and her sisters had arrived, marking the beginning of a joyful communion. Chapter 46. Woman's Sacrifice. A year had passed in constructive work, bringing immense joy to me. I had learned to be useful, finding pleasure in service, experiencing growing jubilation and confidence. Despite the deep desire that pricked my heart, I hadn't returned to my earthly home. At times, I considered seeking permissions in this regard, but something held me back. Hadn't I received adequate assistance and the affection of all my companions? I recognized that if there were benefits, I would have long been directed back to the old family environment. Therefore, I had to wait for the order. Despite my activities in regeneration, Minister Clarencio continued to be responsible for my stay in the colony, a fact repeatedly emphasized by Mrs. Laura and Tobias. Accustomed to caring for the sick and interpreting their thoughts, I hadn't lost sight of Elisa, subtly guiding her towards better endeavors. As my emotional balance solidified, the longing to see my family intensified. However, the certainty of having filled my time with useful service comforted me. In the early days of September 1940, my mother visited the chambers and, after affectionate greetings, communicated her intention to return to Earth. Surprised and disagreeing with such a decision, I protested, questioning the necessity of re-entering the dark path. She explained that my father, Laird, had become a skeptical and embittered heart, and her efforts to uplift him had been in vain. Unable to persist in such a position, she had decided to return to help him find the right path. Despite my concerns, my mother explained that she couldn't avoid this contingency. Her superiors had advised her, and it was impossible to bring the lower to the higher. She emphasized the importance of her presence, indicating that true spirits of love don't limit themselves to extending help from a distance. Despite my reluctance, she reassured me that I would have support in the future and encouraged me to help my mother when I could traverse the spheres separating us from the Earth. My mother had located Laird on Earth with the help of friends, preparing him for immediate reincarnation without his direct awareness. Although I questioned the possibility and the concept of individual freedom, my mother smiled and explained that some reincarnations functioned as drastic measures. She emphasized the need to break the chains we create for ourselves. As I pondered these thoughts, my mother continued, assuring me that she would be reunited with my father for the services entrusted by the Father. Despite the seriousness of the situation, she smiled and expressed hope for a future filled with joy, love, and unity upon a potential return to Nosso Lar. From that moment, my mother became more than just a mother. She became the messenger of comfort, transforming adversaries into children of her heart to lead them back to the path of God's children. Chapter 47. The Return of Laura. Not only was my mother preparing to return to earthly circles, but also Mrs. Laura was on the eve of a significant commitment. Informed by some companions, I joined the demonstration of sympathy and appreciation that various officials, particularly from the aid and regeneration departments, were going to show to the noble matron upon her return to human experiences. The affectionate tribute took place on the night when the Department of Accounts presented her with the notification of her total service time in the colony. The charming residence was filled with melodies and lights, and the flowers seemed even more beautiful. Numerous families came to greet the returning companion, offering warm greetings before departing. However, close friends remained until late at night, providing me with the opportunity to hear curious and wise observations. Mrs. Laura appeared more serious and thoughtful, making an effort to align with the general optimism. The living room, where Lysias' mother explained her global service time, was full, and she expressed her readiness to depart within 2 days after completing the preparations and enlightenment services. During a conversation with a representative from the department, she acknowledged her husband's preceding effort and expressed concerns about the challenges of reincarnation. The minister encouraged her, emphasizing the glory of going to the world under her conditions, supported by thousands of hours of service from a community of over 1 million companions, and with her beloved children serving as a beautiful stimulus. However, Laura confessed her apprehension about the temporary forgetfulness that humans experience, likening it to a patient who has healed from numerous wounds but still bears scars. She feared a slight scratch could lead to a relapse. The minister, named Genesio, reassured her, emphasizing the need for courage and forward progress. He urged her not to dwell on the possibilities of failure, but to focus on the probabilities of success. He reminded her to trust in divine protection and in the support of friends who wouldn't be far away in terms of vibrational distance. The conversation touched on the challenges of facing the lower realms on Earth, and Laura expressed concern about the influences of the lower zones. Genesio countered this, asserting that one should not give such importance to the forces of darkness, and every light kindled on Earth would endure against the winds of human passions. As Laura began to see things more clearly, Genesio emphasized the importance of nurturing positive thoughts and defending against elements of darkness within oneself. The discussion also highlighted the spiritual credits Laura carried, with the governor's office recommending special care in her reincarnation process. The next day, Laura gathered with friends, expressing gratitude for their support. She shared her hope, trust in the Lord, and confidence in her companions. The conversation remained focused on trust and optimism regarding the return to Earth as a blessed opportunity for learning and personal growth. As I bid farewell late at night, Laura invited me to a small intimate gathering the following evening. She mentioned the promised visit of her husband, Ricardo, who would be brought to the spirit realm with the help of fraternal companions. Despite being physically bound, he would join the meeting. Laura also mentioned that it would be her farewell gathering, and she urged me not to miss it, expressing hope and trust in the divine journey ahead. Chapter 48, Family Worship. In the chapter Family Worship, André Luiz attends a unique gathering at Lygia's home, where a spiritualist meeting takes place. While such gatherings might be common for Spiritism practitioners, André finds the scene fascinating and unprecedented. The spacious living room hosts a small assembly of around 30 people, arranged with simplicity. Clarencio, the minister, takes a central position, surrounded by Mrs. Laura and her children. The focal point of the room is a large crystalline globe connected to a device similar to earthly speakers. André inquires about the purpose of the globe, and Nicholas, a familiar face, explains that it serves to insulate against the emotional energies emitted during the session. The meeting awaits a communication from Ricardo, who is currently in the earthly phase of infancy. Nicholas reveals that not all incarnated beings are tethered solely to Earth, as some spirits exist between two worlds. Clarencio, taking charge, calls for unity of thoughts and genuine emotional fusion. The chapter unfolds with a moving prayer by Clarencio, followed by a musical performance involving various instruments and a choir. Lygia's and his sisters, along with Mrs. Laura's daughters and granddaughter, create a beautiful composition expressing deep spiritual sentiments. The music serves as a medium to send a message of love to Ricardo, who eventually appears in the crystalline globe. Ricardo, now in mature form, addresses his family, expressing gratitude for the spiritual gathering. Emotional exchanges occur, and Ricardo requests his family to pray that he may face challenges on Earth, maintaining gratitude and understanding. The session concludes with joyous emotions, and André receives a surprising invitation from Clarencio. He is offered the opportunity to accompany Mrs. Laura to Earth the next day, allowing him to visit his long-awaited family after a year of active cooperation in the spiritual realm. André is overwhelmed with gratitude and joy, anticipating the reunion with his beloved wife and children. Chapter 49, Returning Home. In this chapter, André Luiz returns to his hometown, reminiscing the indescribable feeling of a traveler coming back to their birthplace after a long absence. Despite the landscape remaining relatively unchanged, he is filled with joy. André bids farewell to the small caravan that accompanied him, and Clarencio, a friend, informs him of a week at his disposal for revisiting. André explores his surroundings, noticing both familiar and altered details. Upon reaching his home, André is ecstatic, but his excitement fades as he discovers significant differences. The once familiar house is now occupied by strangers, and his wife Celia is seen with another man, Dr. Ernesto. Overwhelmed by emotion, André observes the changes, realizing that his family has moved on in his absence. His attempts to express joy to Celia go unnoticed, as she is preoccupied with the health of a mature man in the house. André grapples with disappointment and confusion, witnessing his family's altered dynamics. His reflections lead him to question the righteousness of condemning their actions. He contemplates the possibility of his own reactions if he were the widower on Earth and starts recognizing the broader scope of his family, which now extends beyond the earthly realm to the universal community. In the face of these challenges, André begins to understand the depth of Jesus' recommendation to love God and one's neighbor. He grapples with his own emotions and learns to combat the fierce selfishness within. The chapter concludes with André contemplating the emergence of true love from the beneficial wounds reality has opened in his heart. Final chapter, Citizen of Our Home. In the concluding chapter, titled Citizen of Our Home, André Luiz reflects on his transformative experiences in the spiritual realm. As he enters his second night, he realizes the profound value of spiritual nourishment derived from love and mutual understanding. In our home, he engages in active service and training, abstaining from conventional food. Instead, he finds sustenance in the presence of dear friends, affectionate gestures, and the pure elements of air and water. André comprehends the human needs and relationships, acknowledging that he is not an owner, but a brother and friend to others. Remembering the advice of Clarencio, he draws lessons from the lives of fellow residents, finding inspiration in their selfless actions. Facing challenges within a domestic setting, André chooses to prioritize divine love and the needs of others over personal feelings. He embraces the understanding that everyone is connected and seeks to assist Celia and Ernesto, ailing from an aggravated condition. Struggling with the complexities of the situation, André recalls Tobias's teachings about communication and seeks help from Narcissa through mental prayer. Narcissa responds promptly, offering her assistance and introducing André to the healing powers of nature. Together, they utilize the energies of trees to aid Ernesto's recovery, a process André hadn't anticipated. The treatment proves successful, bringing relief and joy to Celia and a newfound sense of accomplishment to André. As André reflects on his growth and lessons learned, he experiences the ability of volitation for the first time, a testament to his spiritual progress. Clarencio acknowledges André's achievements, declaring him a citizen of our home. Overwhelmed with gratitude and emotion, André realizes the greatness of divine providence and the profound love that governs all aspects of life. And so concludes the narrative, leaving André with a heart filled with gratitude, understanding, and a deepened connection to the spiritual realm. Dear listeners, it is with immense gratitude and joy that I express my sincere thanks to each of you who took a moment to listen to the audiobook of Nosso Lar by Chico Xavier, shared here on YouTube. It was a truly enriching experience for me to be able to share this significant and inspiring work. I firmly believe in the transformative power of words and in the ability that stories like those of Nosso Lar have to touch our hearts and expand our understanding of spiritual life. I hope that this audiobook has provided moments of reflection, comfort, and inspiration for all of you. I appreciate the opportunity to share this literary and spiritual journey with such a special community. Your comments, likes, and shares are truly valued as they reflect the warmth and connection we have through the written and spoken word. May the messages contained in Nosso Lar continue to resonate in your hearts, illuminating paths and promoting understanding of life beyond this earthly existence. May we all find comfort and wisdom in the pages of this remarkable work. Thank you very much for being part of this journey of discovery and reflection. May peace and light always be present in your lives. With gratitude,